Allegra, welcome back to the Coach's Journey podcast.
Thank you for having me again.
It is a pleasure. First things first, have you quit coaching?
No, I have not quit coaching. Although we could talk about even the semantics of the question.
Oh, yeah.
There's
Yeah,
so
of
many
course.
that phrase alone. There's so many. I'm really into just like parsing apart phrases. You can see behind me on my whiteboard, it says free coaching session. It's because I did a mentorship call yesterday and we just even broke down that phrase.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this a bit last time, but like for people who haven't listened to that episode or have forgotten because it was a while ago,
Sure.
like give us an example with that one, free coaching session. Like obviously hold the confidentiality for the mentee, but like why was it important to really get into what free coaching session means?
So the past few years, it's been over 2.5 years now. I turned my attention towards mentoring newer coaches, teaching. I have a very strong point of view about the coaching industry and how it begins for people. But along the way, I love connecting with and helping kind of newer coaches not get too sucked into the chaos and insanity of what I call the coaching industrial complex, which we may have talked about before.
Yeah.
And so I love mentoring new coaches and helping them kind of get their feet under them and explore that very dynamic and sometimes messy beginning section. So one of the coaches on the call said, I went on this site and I posted like, hey, I'm offering free coaching sessions. Would anyone like one in exchange for feedback? And no one said anything. No one chimed in. And so I said, I invited her to get very, very curious, and everyone on the call, I was like, we're going to, let's remember we are not our coaching. Like let's just get very curious about why would someone not sign up for a free coaching session? And you and I can dive into that if we want, but we then talked about, I shared kind of why I think that doesn't work all the time, because it can feel very confusing for people. Like, I'm offering free sessions, no one's signing up for them, why not? And I love kind of saying, well, consider this.
Yeah. And let's do it because it's here for us. And it's written in big letters on your whiteboard. Like what because I love it. One of the reasons I love having a group of any group together who have something in common, but a group of coaches is a great example of it. Because you can do that thing in a way by inviting the group as a whole to get curious. You're showing that this person is not their coaching and you're all looking together at something. And it's just so much in that for everybody. What did the group come up with for why people might not respond to an offer of free coaching?
The one of the first things they said is they're like, well, maybe they don't have the time.
Yeah.
And that's something I've been thinking about a lot, about like what this idea that people pay us in more than dollars. And so that was a piece we could talk about, which you and I could dive into more. And a big one too that I think they recognize is they don't know what it is. I mean, those were kind of the two big pieces, is the word free. And my take on that is that people are paying us in more than just dollars. They pay us in time and attention and participation. And like, I'd almost rather have someone pay me no dollars, but fully participate and engage with the work than pay me a lot of money and not show up or just not engage with it. Like, I think coaches only have to experience that a few times. Like, oh my gosh, I just got paid. I'm like, great. Are they going to participate and engage and show up? There's so much more to it. So we talked about just the idea of something being free and how it's not really free, because there's more to it than that. And then we talked about that coaching is not like massage. Like if I said, who wants a free massage? A lot of people would probably say, I'll try a free massage, because people just know that service. They understand it. They know what's going to happen. They either want it or they don't want it. But, I think as coaches, we kind of start at a little bit of a disadvantage because we're providing a service that a lot of people don't understand, or they misunderstand, or they don't, and so there's this runway of having to like explain what it is and what it can help people do. And that I think can feel very difficult, especially for new coaches who are really, really excited about coaching. Like, I just want to be coaching. Doesn't everybody want coaching? And I just want to be like, well, but why do they want it? Like, what, and I just think those conversations are super interesting. So we explored it around that. And,
so wait, I think you've done like the free bit. So if you think about the free coaching session, you've done free, which is like, it's not really free. It's just, they're not paying you money.
Right.
And like, I think there's a beautiful thing in there, which is really with every client. Yeah. It's worth probably sitting down and thinking about all those ways we might get paid and which ones matter the most.
Yeah.
And there are times when you might want to make a really different decision about money because of another way that you're getting paid. Or you might want to, like, sometimes money gives you some of the other things, like not always, as you pointed out, but sometimes money breeds commitment or can not quite cause, but like partially cause commitment or assist with it, enable it. And sometimes it doesn't. And there's all these ways that is true, but there are also other ways we get paid. And there's definitely reasons to think carefully about that for all of us. I mean, probably not just in coaching, and other businesses too. And then you've talked about the word coaching in free coaching session, which is like, do they actually know what it is? Well, not as well as a massage, right? If I was going to get a free massage from someone who said they were qualified, or even said they were in training and they were going to come to my house, so I didn't have to go anywhere, as long as that wasn't weird, like, I would do it. Of course. I was just having a conversation with someone just before this call about her planning to do, it's her 12th anniversary tomorrow, and they're hoping to do a spa weekend. I was just saying, I have a massage every like 2 years in the last 6 years. And every time I do it, I'm like, why don't I do this every week?
Right.
And I do know that about coaching because I've experienced the magic of it. And so if at the right time, but even then, like, I know of free coaching offers and I don't take all of them.
Right.
And like, in fact, I don't really take any of them these days because I want to pay like particular people to coach me. That's kind of where I am. So there's lots of reasons why the coaching bit would stop. Did you talk about the word session?
No, we did not talk about the word session. That's a great point. We didn't break down that one. I do use a lot of, and it's fun because I like to play with the name of what it is. A lot of times I'll use the word coaching experience. Yeah. Because experience can include, it can be a lot of different things, but that's a great note. Just like we didn't break down that particular word.
Yeah, I wonder what would have been different. I wonder, like, I don't know, but a conversation experience. I love that. I'd forgotten that you did that. And then in the part of the preparation I did for this call was to listen back to our last call.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it then, and I was like, I didn't really ask Allegra much about that. I mean, you gave an explanation a little bit like you did then, and you talked a little bit last time about, well, it enables you to put other things into that in the way the word experience just gives permission that it's not just a session.
Yeah.
Because session is like probably a word inherited from counseling, I would guess. I would guess that's why it's a coaching session. I don't know that for sure. Conversation, experience, intensive, free strategy conversation. What was your thing? The whiteboard thing, like a free walk, an interesting walk, with an interesting conversation. Like all of those things could have been the person doing the same thing, especially if they're given a little bit of contract. They would need to do a few sentences of contracting, with that person to let them know they were going to do it in some way at some point. And they could have done essentially the same thing and would have probably got different results. Now, I might have got the same result for some of those. Like because we don't know what's happening for everybody in that group. We don't even know if the group the algorithms of whatever platform the group was on showed people the post. Like, you never know, do you? But even that word probably, by changing it, could have changed the result.
It would have been fascinating. Yeah, I like experience too, because I'm a big advocate for getting really creative with our coaching work and how can we make it more interesting and creative and fun. And I think about things too of like the container and the content. So a container might be a Zoom call, or it could be a walk in the woods. And we could have the same conversation in the Zoom call or the same conversation in the woods, and they'll feel totally different. But I like thinking too about, well, what's the container, which is usually the logistics. How long is it? Where is it? Where are we meeting? Are we, you know, all the pieces. And then the content is what comes up between me and the person who I'm with. Am I directing more of the content, or are we just showing up and saying, well, what are we talking about today? Like, I think it's so neat thinking about the variables of a session and the variables of an experience, and how can we turn all those little knobs to design something different for the person who we're working with. And I think that's another thing that can set, you know, my coaching apart from your coaching, apart for like, that can make that experience just more unique, which I just always think is fun.
Yeah. At the very end, I think this is what it was. At the very end of our last call, one of us said, I think maybe you heard me say something, or the other way around, said coach for fun would be a good business like name. So someone else out there can have that, unless you've already bought the URL.
No.
So Allegra, like, people who want to hear your whole story can go and listen to that, or some of your story in detail can go and listen to the other episode. But it probably, I just realized I need to explain to people who are listening why I asked that question, which you skillfully avoided by talking about passing. You didn't really avoid it. You just talked to, which is, have you quit coaching?
Oh, got it. Okay, great.
So for listeners, like Allegra and I were exchanging some emails about something else. And I said, I think you said, shall we catch up? And I said, yeah, let's record it, because that would be fun. And you said, yeah, I mean, we can record it for your podcast for coaches, but I'm thinking of getting a job.
Yeah. So,
right. And I thought that's even better. Like, it would be, it may have moved on by now, but thinking about, I just think it made me think that there is a conversation that I've never heard in the coaching world, which is like, when is it time to quit? Like, when it's not right for you, like, how do we manage that? Because lots of people start out in coaching, and perhaps because of those, the coaching industrial complex, some of that weirdness of the coaching industry, there's this like impression that if you show up, coaching will fulfill all your dreams. And that is because it has the potential to fulfill a lot of dreams for a lot of people, because it is essentially a location independent way of doing really meaningful work, which some people make a lot of money from.
Yep.
And very flexible. So it's like, you can fit it around being a mom, just like you can fit it around being a backpacker in Colombia. And you can make 6 figures in 6 easy steps doing it. So like, why wouldn't it just fulfill all your dreams in 6 weeks? And then there's this hard light of day moment of, you know, in my view, mostly coaching is like, it's a hard job. Like, it doesn't have to be not fun, and it doesn't have to be not fulfilling, but probably you're going to have to do some hard things if you want to have success in it, in the way that you're sold. And that means that there are a bunch of people who come to it on essentially a false promise. And some of those people, when they realize the truth, want to do the hard work. And some of them naturally, of course, I thought this was a one-way quick ticket, cheap ticket to all my dreams. They realize it's not that, and they decide they don't want to pursue it. And that doesn't mean that all the training they've done isn't really useful for them, and they haven't learned loads about themselves and changed and grown. But there isn't really that conversation about, when is it time to quit? And so that's why I asked, have you quit coaching?
I love it. So here, I think there's a very important distinction that I make that I'd love your thoughts on. Because I said to a friend of mine, I don't know, it was a couple months ago, I said, I'm thinking about looking for a job. And she goes, oh, you're done coaching? I thought, or you're going to quit coaching. There is a very, very important line in my mind between the craft of coaching and running a coaching business.
Yeah.
I do not want to quit coaching. I'd love to get a job coaching. I'd love to get a job doing the work, the delivery that I love most. I love coaching. I love mentoring. I love teaching. I love workshop facilitating. Like, I love the craft of coaching. I do not want to quit. What I come upon a lineup is that running a business, making a business out of your coaching, is a totally separate skill set. I mean, they're intertwined. I mean, you got to be a good coach to have to sell it. And I know that the line is a little bit blurry because, well, to sell our coaching, we have to give the experience of it. So we're coaching, but also trying to sell it. Like it's this whole thing. But the part of it that's like getting people in the room and feeling like that piece has never been what I'm most passionate about. And I can do it. And I understand the principles of marketing and building relationships and selling and all of that stuff. I have so much experience in, but sometimes I just would love to go somewhere and do the work. Like, you know, I was talking to someone about this the other day. I was talking to a new coach who recently was certified, and I remember this feeling so well, and maybe you do too. Like she'd gone through the certification program, and you get an email or you go to the final thing, but whatever happens, you're like, I'm a coach now, right? Because of either you just decided it, which some people do, which is great, or they go through a certain, and they're sitting in their office or their living room, or they're walking their dog or putting their kids on the bus, and they're just like, well, now what? Now what? But because, and I think you captured it, because it is marketed as and I've heard this, get your certification, you can start getting paid. But you realize, as you put, like, there's so much more to it. And I was talking to this woman about that, who's in that position right now, that I remember so well. And I just was like, yeah, there's a lot of time that's like unpaid time, non-coaching time, that leads up to that coaching moment. Like there's a lot of stuff we do to create those moments where we are delivering and in our craft. And it can be a very profound split at the beginning, like 70-30, let's say, right? And it would just be neat. I would love for more of my working hours to be spent delivering and serving, and maybe fewer hours thinking about how to find and gather and collect the people to deliver and serve. I don't know if this is making sense, but it's not that I want to quit coaching. It's that I'm a little, entrepreneurship is hard, you know, and it would just be nice to not have to think about those parts of it for a little bit, but it has to be the right fit, because I can turn those pieces on. Like I have workshops I'm leading, I have clients I'm working with. And just sometimes I wake up in the morning, I'm like, man, I wish I could just go do my craft and have the people there and just the stuff that lights me up the most, and not have to think about how to get the people in with me to have that experience.
Yeah. And this might sound like a weird question, but why do you have to think about how to get the people in to have that experience?
Well, I liken it, the metaphor that I really like to use is like a chef in a food truck. I don't know. Have you heard that? Have you heard me talk about this?
You told some great stories last time, some great metaphors. It's one of the things you do really well, but I think you referenced the food truck, but you didn't. Right. Oh, no, the food truck reference was the artificial niche. It was like retired volleyball players with a food truck or something like that. But no, you didn't talk about chef and food truck.
So I think about it, a metaphor that I love, and I do love a lot of them, but one of them that I think about a lot, it's like there's a chef who graduates culinary school who loves to cook, right? Loves to cook. I love to coach. Like I love it. I love the craft of my work. And that chef, when they get out of culinary school, can either go work in a restaurant where they just go and they just cook all day. Now there are constraints. They have to show up at a certain time. They lose the freedom of being able to cook whenever they want. And they usually have to kind of tailor their cooking to meet the needs of the restaurant.
Yeah, nice.
But they are just practicing their craft over time. Or that chef could say, well, I'm going to go open a food truck. Right? So that chef, which I think is kind of the equivalent of a new coach saying, well, I want to have my own coaching practice. So they get the food truck, and then that food truck is sitting out on their driveway. And they wake up every morning and they're like, man, I can't wait to cook today. They just want to cook. That's their passion. They're cooking. But the only but that getting that food truck out to building relationships, learning about local festivals, getting to the festival, hoping that people line up to eat the food, like that's the energy that I feel about it sometimes. Is no one that the craft of running a food truck is connected to, but different than the craft of cooking in the truck. So when you ask like, well, why do I need to think about the people? It's like, well, because to do my work, I want people in the room with me.
Yeah.
I can talk about it. I can talk like this. I can do podcasts and I can write blog posts and I can put up stories and I can create and I can share my point of view. But to do the craft, the craft happens between me and the person, or me and the small group of people. But I am also responsible for creating that moment, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, the food truck just sits on my driveway and I'm just sitting here thinking about coaching, but not doing as much of it as I want to do. And again, I am doing it. I am teaching and mentoring actively. I have stuff happening in my own practice and I get to do this work, it is the business side of coaching I just think can be draining.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And there was a really nice, one of my favorite bits actually listening back to our last conversation was just this similar distinction around the business and coaching. And we were talking about coach training. And you were saying how like it's interesting that the business stuff is in the coach training a little bit now, but which is good because people sometimes leave training with a bit more of an idea of what they're getting themselves in for. But the bad thing is it equates, it kind of confuses the fact that those two things are different. And we had, I had this great picture in my mind. I was listening to it of, this possibility that you can choose to do any combination of those two things, right? You can have a business, but not coach. It wouldn't be a coaching business, but it would be something that could be something that looks a bit like it. You could coach in theory, but not have a business. You could do both, or you could quit both. And I guess what you're saying is there is a sense that you want to quit. If you could, you would do, it sounds like one of the things is you want more of your time. Like that sounds like the key thing. You want more of your time to be in the craft and less of it to be in the business stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm noticing is, for me, like, this is a really interesting insight for me to have, really, that it's not so obvious to me that the stuff that I'm doing that is not the craft of coaching has so for example, I've been working a lot on my books this year.
Yeah.
It's not so obvious to me that they are of a lower value to me than the coaching. So that's one of the reasons I was asking that. I was like, what is it about the other stuff, the stuff that isn't the craft, that has your intuition or your reflection saying, I want to be doing less of this? And what I heard is it's because really you want to be doing more of the craft itself.
It's interesting because I think about, so what I'm doing now, I think about coaching and the coaching industry all the time. I wake up in the morning and have ideas that I want to share. I'm voxing with people who, read an email of mine and they sent me, I'm like, oh, send me a vox. We're just voxing back and forth about these ideas. And if I was to get a job, I would probably still want to talk about coach. Like I love putting ideas out there. It is very much a creative practice for me. I can't help it. I go and see people, coaches talk, and I just want to help them. And I don't want to stop doing that. It's an interesting, like,
you want to do it more, right? Is basically the thing.
What's that?
You want to do it more.
I want to do it more, but I'm curious is there a line for you between what you get paid for versus what you're not getting? Does it all feel the same to you? That like, is there any, I'm just curious about that piece because I also have, this is also not a hobby.
Yeah.
This is not a hobby. I'd like, it is my work and I get paid for it. And that piece of it is it's just an interesting, I don't know, it's just a very interesting line between those two things. And I'm all about, I'm not money motivated. I have never been driven by financial goals. For me, the getting paid for me usually is more of a result and not something that I'm aiming for. I very much lead with like, if no one, I hope this is helpful, even if no one ever like buys anything from me or works with me. But it is an interesting for others who have that kind of worldview about this craft of like, we just do it because we love it, because we have to, because we say it because we have to say these things. I do get curious about that line between like, and it's nice when people want to sign up and actually do the work and pay us for what's in our souvenir shop and not just visit in the free museum.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I'm curious to your kind of relationship with that.
Yeah. The things that I notice are there's like an enough thing that goes on for me. So if I'm not doing enough of the kind of like the coaching that I not got into this for, but that I now feel is like the best kind of coaching that I do, if there's not enough of that happening, then I get a little like, then there's a thing going on for me about my coaching business. And I want more of it. So it's like, there's an enough piece around that. And then the money, like I love the money metaphor. I can't remember who I heard it from, that money isn't the point of a business.
Right.
But money is a bit like the lifeblood in a body. It's not the point of the body, but if you don't have enough of it, everything feels really weird, right? And that's what I think business is like. It's like as long as I've got enough money, then I am actually like at peace with the stuff that I'm not getting paid for. And then at the times when I don't have enough, the whole thing starts to feel weird.
Right.
And like I'm at an interesting point. So for example, and then as long as there's enough, then I'm able to do things like zoom right out and think about the long game. In which case, like spending if you factor into the amount of time that I've spent on, for example, my books, it'll be a while before they may never, given that time, if you try and equate it to coaching sessions, they may never pay that back in terms of book sales, but they will be a long game project. Like, I don't know, because they could be around forever if I want them to. So as long as I have enough of the coaching that I love the most and the enough money in the business, right? Like I have done pretty much all of this year, although I'll talk about that in a sec. Then I don't notice the pressure. But it was interesting at the start of the year, I was starting to feel some pressure, and it wasn't the money, because I had a couple of big projects on that were kind of meant that I knew this was going to be a good financial year for me. But it was that a certain type of client, I hadn't had one of for a while, like a particular length of engagement. It was like I hadn't had a particular length of engagement, particular type of client. And I was starting to think, I need to take some action around this. And then 2 of them showed up. And so I was feeling really different about my business once those people showed up, because there was this type of work I love to do that was suddenly happening again.
Right.
Now, having said all that, an interesting thing's happening for me at the moment. Like I'm noticing a little, like those people haven't come. There hasn't been more of those people showing up in the last few months. A couple of people have left my group program, and we've just bought a house. And so I'm looking at the future thinking, actually, it would be useful for me. I talked in the last episode I've talked about before, really important moment for me was like realizing that I didn't have to keep raising my fees, right? I mean, you kind of like, I've got the money I need. But actually there's this question now that actually do I in the next stage of my life? So there's a lot of, I guess it's a live, you putting that question or thing to me, it's a live question for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that sense of that when there's enough, we don't think about it, but if it drops, and when you said it's like, I feel like your blood pressure drops, like something's off. And, I guess I don't know. I'm not a fan of that feeling. I don't know. It's just like, I don't like creating with that. It's something about creating with that pressure on it. I've never been a fan of, like, it's always been hard for me doing quote unquote launches, where a launch simply meaning that there's a time that something starts. That's all I mean by launch, is like, I want to start a class on this date, or I want to start a program on this date. I am not a fan of how I feel leading up to that date.
Yeah.
Because it gets into the, like, it's starting, who, like, that waiting, and there's just something about that dance that has never lit me up. I don't find it energizing or fun to, I don't know. So I've then before been like, well, I'm not going to do any more live. I'm just going to everything's just going to be evergreen. People can sign up whenever they want. But then there's no urgency to, like, I think that's a true psychological thing of, but then if you can sign up anytime, then why go? Like, it's just there all the time. And that kind of stuff, so what I just kind of lean back and just keep doing my, but there's these, and I don't know if it's again, a variable of just being an entrepreneur and kind of holding some of those ideas and principles around work. But just, I don't know that I've ever truly felt comfortable in that role, even though I can do it. Even though I can do it, and I can do it fine. And I've had great years and slower years. Like, I don't measure my year by that, but it's just that piece of it has never, I don't know, quite felt like the right fit. Yeah. What feels like the fit for me is the delivery, the actual craft. And again, I recognize that doing the craft is kind of part of it's like this weird thing of, like, going back to the food truck metaphor, I can go cook at a farmer's market and just give my food out. And that is a form of, like, doing my craft, but also letting people know that I exist, that it's out here and they can have more of it if they'd like. But yeah, I think that's the closest I've come to describing it. It's like a jacket that doesn't quite fit right. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I like the Gay Hendricks distinction, the zone of excellence, zone of genius. It's like, it sounds like zone of excellence stuff for you is how you feel about it. It's like, you can do it. You do it better than a lot of people. People might even ask you for help with it. Right. People like, people admire you for it, but it's not the same. It doesn't give you endless, bottomless energy. It's not like it in itself creates all this abundance for you. And actually, there probably are people out there who love it more than you. And I got that feeling. I feel the same with you about launches. In fact, I don't think we talked about this, but I had a similar experience. I was just like, I used to do a launch really just once a year for 3 years. And that launch was the most stressful part of my year. And in the end, it was for my group program for coaches, which is where the name of this podcast, that's the first thing that was named after that, named The Coach's Journey. And then I was like, this is hell. What if I could just arrange it differently? And I've got an open, it's good practice. The Coach's Journey community is great practice for me in detachment, because people show up and they disappear. Yeah. And sometimes just disappear without telling me. And mostly they don't, mostly they say, but it's like, it's like, really, well, okay, I've decided that I'm just going to chill out about this. Yeah. And that's been fine so far. Although it'll be interesting if a bunch of people leave. It'll be interesting what happens at that point. And it's a really good point that you make. So where I got to, one of the interesting things about how I designed the Coach's Journey community a little by accident is that I accidentally created a little bit of, now's the time to try it. And I'm quite, hearing you say that now, I'm glad that I accidentally did that. Yeah. Because it does mean there is a reason to come along, particularly a couple of times a year. Yeah. That's so for people listening, basically who don't know, or you might know, basically the way I designed the membership is I wanted it to be, I think there's an episode of the show about this. I talked about it in detail in episode like 18 or something. There's like I wanted to have a way of working with me that was super affordable. Yeah. So the bottom level membership for the Coach's Journey community at the moment is like £10 a month.
Nice.
But for that, you don't get much, right? You get a bunch of things, but in terms of the group coaching experience, which is it's basically the community is a group coaching experience. In terms of that, you get 2 calls a year. What that means is, and then there's another level, and then there's one where you get to come to all the calls and get some one-on-one time with me.
Sure.
And what that means is that those 2 times when you can sign up at just £10, come and then cancel if you don't like it afterwards. Right. That creates, I'm just realizing that creates a little bit of that launch feeling without me having to worry, because the benefit is like £10 if someone signs up, and the cost if they don't is £10. And so it doesn't matter so much to me. And sometimes those people come at £10, go up to £20, then go up to £100 later on if they want to. But it's interesting to have that, that launch feeling. And well, I can hear Allegra. So I guess I'm curious then. I'm really glad, first of all, when I was listening to the show this morning that we recorded last time, I was reminded of what a pleasure it is to hear the way you think about coaching. Like all those distinctions, all those metaphors. It's like, I was thinking, there's a thing that Allegra is doing here, which is so good. And you also have this great phrasing, which I think, which is like, because they are your thoughts. And you often say like, the way I say it is, or the way I think about it is. And it's like, oh yeah, that is a real Allegra thought that we're getting here, this distinction, this idea, this metaphor. So I'm glad that what you're saying is, if you get a job, A, you're not going to leave coaching behind, and B, you'll still be doing that. So, and it's interesting. So I knew that you might be getting a job, and it was interesting in your story. So the way we got to it, I don't know if you've thought about it in this way at other times. We got into a series of chapters, and there was like B School chapter, where you like tried to start an online business because that's what you thought it was, and then niche down, and then you realized that wasn't it. Then there was a prosperous coach chapter where you just dived into that and you did all that serving and the long 6-month engagements. And then there was maybe the whiteboard session chapter. And then unfortunately I missed one. I was making notes. I was on the cross trainer this morning. I must have missed one. But then the 5th one, we said it was the 5th one, was you were about to get a job. And then someone said, you don't need a job, you need a UMAP.
Yes.
And that was chapter 5 is what we said. So I don't know what chapter 4 was. Someone will have to listen back to the other one and hear it.
It's better than I've thought about it. So it's awesome.
And so it's interesting that now we're back, and maybe we're back at the end of the UMAP chapter. I don't know, or the chapter that you've been in, but you're back at, shall I get a job? Essentially, because it was similar. You said that the thinking like, and it's really interesting, right? Because we've been talking in that conversation for you about how a rhythm in your life had been a big change every 2 or 3 years.
It is.
And here we are about then, and there's something going on again. So last time, according to what we said in the last time we spoke on the show, it was, you were thinking, is there another coach that I can help grow their business and then fulfill some of that kind of thing? Is there I think you said, is like a coaching school I can work for? Like, where are you with that now, with this thinking about, is there a job? You're not quitting coaching, but if you were to quit the coaching business side of things, what's the job, or what might be the jobs that you're looking at and thinking about? And are you quitting the coaching business side of things, I guess, is a part of that question as well.
So my coaching business is still running. I have ongoing mentorship calls that people can sign up for. I have classes that I'm running this fall. Like the knobs are still turned on. And even if I were to get a job, so like working for someone else, I don't know that stuff would ever fully turn off. Someone said to me, they used the phrase portfolio practice, where it's like a collection of things. So, even if an opportunity came up over here, it doesn't mean that Allegra Stein coaching would completely go away. And in fact, I would probably keep sharing all of my thoughts and opinions and ideas and things for people to talk about, or to have conversations about, like we talked about before. Like, I still want to have an impact in that space if it would help somebody. So the Allegra Stein coaching business is still here. And you're right, that was in 2019. That was the spring. Do you remember when it was that we had that conversation?
We had this conversation in like, the last time we spoke was, I think, early 2020, I think, but I am not 100% sure. So
there was a whole other chapter that followed from that, because in 2019, I was at the first half of 2019 had kind of reached a similar place where I was like, you know what? I just don't like running the business side of this is not.
Sorry, Allegra. It was later than that. It was early 2021.
Oh, okay. So
that we were speaking.
so at that point I think I opened up Misfit to Maverick, which was the community space.
You absolutely had. So that was going to be one of my questions. You just basically, I think,
That's right,
done that business model shift that you were just talking about.
That's right.
And so one of the things was, I'm curious, like there wasn't enough data really to, or maybe we ran out of time to talk about that in detail. So I'm curious as part of this conversation to hear about how that's panned out. I guess that's maybe where you're going there.
That was the most recent chapter. And the most recent chapter was shifting to a membership model and opening up a community space on Mighty Networks, which was October of 2020. So we spoke early 21. So I was probably
the episode came out early 21. We might have spoken late 20, actually. I can't remember.
It was right probably at the beginning of it. And Misfit to Maverick Mighty Networks was something that I hosted and held for almost 2 years. I mean, it was just this past June that entering into the summer season, which is always a dynamic season for me because my kids are home, and it's I actually made the decision to pause everyone's dues because I was like, I need to figure out something was kind of brewing, and I didn't feel comfortable taking all of the reins off when I was still hosting this space and had members of it. So I said, I'm going to pause your dues for the next few months, just so I feel like I'm honoring, what your expectations are, but also can really explore and open up what could come next. And that's kind of what brought me into this fall season and into the summer of gosh, do I, entering back into this phase of what could be next for how I show up and do my work. And I know you asked that question of what that could look like, but there was so much I learned through hosting that community. It was, and just lessons about membership and community in general. It's a whole model that you get. I mean, you have a membership based model.
Yeah.
And it is, I think people don't, it's like a whole craft. Just,
I mean, I feel like and members of the community will probably agree with this. I guess I did, if I look back on it, I did a classic Robbie Swale thing, which is that I just did a kind of messy minimum job and saw what happened. And they have picked it up. The truth is that the Coach's Journey community doesn't have a Mighty Network space, even though I kind of know that I kind of like it. I got as close as I surveyed the membership, and they said, yeah, we'd be interested in that kind of thing. And I was going to use a different platform. And one of them said, don't use that platform. It's terrible. Use Mighty Networks. It's ace. And then I haven't done anything about it. And part of the reason is I really focus on making all the things I do, trying to make them sustainable. Yeah. And I could just imagine how I wasn't sure how that would get out of hand. Part of the reason is I haven't got around to it. Part of the reason
Where do you host it now?
Because that isn't, so the membership runs through Patreon.
Okay.
Which is part of the reason I would move to Mighty Networks is Patreon is a really clunky platform in loads of ways. But one of the things that happened was because I wasn't doing anything, they just set up a WhatsApp group. And I said, no, I don't want to be in it, because that felt like, for a bunch of reasons, but partly because I find WhatsApp a bit, it's for my kind of personal boundaries, really. I find WhatsApp a bit overwhelming and hard to ignore. So when I'm on work duty in WhatsApp, that's a bit much for me sometimes, but also because I think it's cool. I like the idea that there's stuff happening without me. That's great. The point of it. But there is so much in it, and it's weird having a community, because it's it has a life of its own, really. Because if it's in any way a real community, then it has a life of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but this also makes me think, Allegra, just of something I thought before when you were talking about the business of coaching distinct from the craft of coaching, which is that I feel like running, you talked about what you've learned about memberships. And I just feel like if I was a coach but I wasn't doing the coaching business side of things, there was so much learning about myself and about business, but particularly about myself, that I would have missed out on. So much of my growth in the last 7 years since I started coaching has been me having to face down all the stuff about myself that makes running a business hard.
Sure.
But you've got to but there's time for that, and there's time, but that's not an easy thing to do, I guess, is what's coming up as well.
Do you think that entrepreneurship is for everyone?
No, that's my response. My intuition is no.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing for me too of like, would you say that coaches who want to run their own practice are saying yes to entrepreneurship?
I think we have to do your thing, right? We have to really slow down on the word practice, and all those kinds of things. So it depends.
Like if a coach says, I want to have if a coach says, I want to find my own clients, essentially, right? Like,
that's a good. That's a great distinction. Like that's exactly what was going through my mind.
Yeah, someone's coming out of their certification. Maybe they've wherever they're at in their life. Maybe they have a job now and they want to start. But essentially, they're saying, I want to find my own clients.
Yeah,
I don't want to get a job somewhere where the clients, because you asked really quickly about what kind of job. I mean, there are companies out there now, it's becoming more and more prevalent where they staff coaches, where if you can get hired potentially, I mean, it's I'm sure there are hiccups all along the way, but if you can get hired, essentially you're just on deck as a coach and you're paired with clients and you show up for the work. And but anyway, a person says, I want to find my own clients. Is that person just wanting to find one's own clients entrepreneurship?
Well, we probably have to define entrepreneurship, don't we? But and some people, there's an annoying. I get on some apps at the moment. There's an annoying advert that I don't like, which says, which makes basically it's as a lot of these video ads you get on apps are, it's a slightly smug person essentially trying to make me feel uncomfortable, so I buy their thing. And the way this person tries to make me feel uncomfortable is by saying, if you are required to be there to make money, you aren't an entrepreneur, you're just self-employed. And I'm like, well, screw you. But so my distinction of entrepreneur, like, I don't know what the actual definition is.
I know.
But if I get interested in, because I get interested, and I know that you do too, I get interested in creativity wherever that's happening, right? And so for me, the spirit of the entrepreneur is the same as the spirit of the creative. It's I'm gonna do, there's a thing that could exist that doesn't exist, and I'm gonna create it. And that is the same for a writer as someone who starts a business. And it's definitely, I am going to create my own clients. I'm going to find those people, or the people that come to coaching in my business that are created in that way, rather than, because I work for BetterUp sometimes. So of course. So I get fed clients by them. And those people that's not entrepreneurial, and I'm not creating anything. I'm just showing up. Those people would be getting coached by another BetterUp coach if I wasn't there.
Right.
The clients in my business are a bit different. Some of them, it's possible, would have found another coach.
Mm-hmm.
But for some of them, for sure, and possibly for most of them, they either wouldn't have looked for another coach, or if they'd gone looking for other coaches, they might have chosen not to do coaching. Like it might, I know for some of them, it will be to do with me and what we created in those initial conversations that led them to part with the hundreds or thousands of pounds that they've parted with to be coached by me.
Right.
And so there is something definitely more, in my view, entrepreneurial, but certainly creative about, I want to find my own clients. And I guess is being an entrepreneur for everyone. The reason I said no to that is like, is this, I think this thing we're talking about is that it's not, or that I totally believe it's like, it's not a, so the reason that, I feel like one of the cycles of the entrepreneur is what I called an article I wrote about it, is one of them is boom bust. Like there'll be some great times and some bad times. There are other ones, I can't remember what I wrote in the article. And one of them is, I'm going to quit this thing and get a normal job.
Yeah.
And I think this is, so far, this might be the first calendar year of 7 or of 8, Allegra, that I've been coaching in, that I have not been through that cycle. So I have not this year thought, do you know what? I know, exactly. I know. Could happen. So far, so good. Like, we'll see. It's going to be great. We'll get to 2023 and I'll text you, or like it'll be December the 30th and I'll be like, Allegra, I was wrong.
We should do this annually. We should put this down and just every year we check in what's happening.
But that is one of the cycles. And I think the reason that's one of the cycles is the same reason that I said it's not for everyone, which is that, like, what is it? It's like, there are some, what actually is it? I keep wanting to say it's easier to have a job. And that's not complex enough to capture the actual thing. Because, like, I've had jobs where technically they were easy, they were secure, but it was not easy to stay in those jobs because my soul was saying, what the hell are you doing with this one precious life you've got?
Right.
So it's not necessarily easy, but it's like there's a stability that comes from them, or a perceived stability. I guess you could question, like, how stable a job really is, because, most businesses or organizations, if you work for a government agency, it can be cut. If you work for a business, they can go bust.
Sure.
There's a perceived stability, which I think is a really valid choice to make.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not that those people couldn't put themselves through what it might take for them to start a business or run a business or find their own clients or whatever it might be. It's just that it's a perfectly valid life choice to want the stability and to not want to have to do the things that are unstable about entrepreneurship. Or if you got into it because of the craft and the way we were talking about, it's perfectly, I think it's an incredibly valid viewpoint to say, well, look, I got into it for the craft. I only want to do the craft. That's what I want to find. I don't and you're kind of potentially saying it. You're saying, I can do this stuff. I know I can do this stuff.
Sure.
I might choose not to. Now, it is worth saying, you're on the other side, right? So there's
right.
two really different reasons you could be saying, I don't want to do the entrepreneurial bit. You could be doing it having never tried because it's too scary and you're afraid. And it's not necessarily the wrong reason. It's still not necessarily the wrong thing to do to not do it. That's really different to, I've done it. In fact, I've done it for 10 years. I know a lot about it. I'm thinking about it. I've been through the looking glass or into Narnia, and now I'm back and I'm deciding that actually, exactly, I'm back out and I'm deciding that actually I'm going to choose not to go back in for the next phase. And it's like, I guess I'm catching that's a different thing to, I'm not doing it because it feels too difficult and I'm afraid, which again, it's not like being afraid is a normal human thing.
Of course.
What are you noticing?
I mean, I think a lot of there's without question so much people learn about themselves by embarking on that journey. I mean, I think it's one of many adventures someone can have to say, I want to not just create my own clients, but create clients who are paying. I think that's an interesting thing too. I've been thinking about that a lot of like, I came up with, this is a bit of a diversion, but I'll just put it on the table. You can pick it up in a minute if you want, but I've been thinking about the challenge of asking coaches to like, can you fill your calendar with free sessions? And exploring that idea that people pay in more than just dollars, but sessions that people show up for and participate in, and like just cracking open what it's like just to invite people and have them want to say yes to these interactions and these experiences with us. But there's so much to learn just from doing that, not to mention then getting paid for it and that exchange and how to work that into it, that layer of things. So I wouldn't trade it for anything. And there's still so many beautiful gifts from having gone through that and knowing that I could continue on that journey if I wanted to. Like I could, like I said, I could keep the knobs turned up. And I am looking at it from the other, side of that experience. Like, well, it's not, do I want to try it? It's like, oh, I've tried it and I've experienced it. Do I want to continue it? Do I want to continue it in the same way that I have?
Because actually at the start, it's not just do I want to try it, it's also can I do it? Like that's like, so because if I think about what are the like I'd love to hear what yours are, but you talked about all the things you've learned, and it's like if I think about some of the things I've learned, it's like one of them is I can essentially create money. Like I didn't know that, like for myself, like I didn't know that it, like before, when I worked in jobs, the way I got more money was to get a promotion or move jobs. And now the way I get more money is I essentially create some more money. And sometimes it's, like I say, it's money that wouldn't have been, it's not like I'm competing for that money. It's just money that wouldn't have been spent on coaching.
Right.
And that's really changed how I feel about and see money, which is a really important, you know, for better or worse in our world, how you see money is an important thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, there's lots in there, and knowing that we can do it. Like with a client, like a coaching client, or sorry, a client of mine who is a coach, it always seems, it's a big moment when they know they can sell coaching.
Yeah.
Versus not knowing yet. Because if they don't, and also for, you know, if we're looking together as two people, as a group, at how can this person grow their business? Like, how can they get more of what they want if they want to grow their business in terms of paying clients? If they've never sold a paying coaching session, like, we don't yet know what's going on there. And as soon as they've sold one, we know they can do that. And then there's just like, knob twiddling to get more of the right things in some ways. So a few things there. Jump off whatever feels right.
I'll never forget one of my first mentors. Her name is Joyce Campbell. And she was is such a skilled practitioner and coach. And I'll never forget being on a session with her. And I forget what the context was, but I feel like she was telling me a little bit about what was going on in her world, and how she was like, yeah, I could get some more clients to do this thing, but I kind of want to do something different. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like, what an amazing position to be in, to just know that you could if you needed to. And I forget all the specifics of the conversation, other than she described it as being like a faucet that you can turn on and off. And it's incredible. And since then, I have worked with coaches who have gotten to that moment where they're like, yeah, I created some clients for this offer, but now I think I want to do another offer. I'm like, let's just pause for 1 second and just really soak in the fact. I'm like, you've got a faucet. Yeah. You've got a faucet. The fact that you know that you can just sense when someone's like, I could get some more clients doing that, but I don't want to. It's like, just that moment of knowing you can turn the faucet on and off is really, I agree. It's a very kind of, you know, and yeah, I mean, that's a really cool feeling to get to. Yeah, so I just wanted to note that. It's a neat experience to have. And I don't know that it comes after even that first yes. I mean, it happens after you kind of get to this moment where you're like, I could get, you know.
Yeah. But, you're right. There's a bunch of stages probably, aren't there? I feel like there's one after a first yes, when the first money is paid. But you're right, there is one when you see some kind of pattern. And I remember one of my mentors, Katie Harvey, who's been on the podcast a couple of times. People can check those episodes out. You know, I remember her saying once, I might have talked about this on the show before, I can't remember, that I think this was her. It feels like a Katie story. Just like when she wanted more clients, she got to a stage where she knew she just needed to do some things. And those things weren't always the same, but usually when she started taking action, like, she couldn't even see the causality always, but usually some clients would start to appear. And I feel like that a bit in my business. It's like, there's a bunch of things that I know in the end lead to clients that at this, you know, for 2 years, I've been making a quite difficult choice now that I'm not going to do that in order essentially to finally get these books done. Right. You know, it's been on my list. It's like, what's on my do this year list? Get the books out. What are the things that will stop me doing that? Like pouring a bunch of energy into client creation. And it's like, it's quite hard to hold the nerve on that when you know, with the coaching practice and all the things we've said. But if I had done all those things, it would be different. And I don't know that those things, like, I don't know that there's a bunch of people that, for example, I could reconnect with old clients. Like, one of the things I used to do all the time is, like, after 6 months after I'd worked with someone, when I was really focused on growing my coaching business, 6 months after I'd worked with somebody, I would contact them, gift them, offer them a session, or have a cup of coffee with them. And I just haven't done that for ages, because it's like I'm saying no to that so I can say yes to the book. So I know there's those things there. Now, I don't know that that would directly lead to those people signing up again, but I now, because I've been doing this a while, have, I think, a sense of that embodied confidence that you're seeing in those coaches, or you saw in Joyce.
Right.
But if I did do some things, probably some people would show up.
Yeah.
And that is a moment, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Allegra, like, it's been great to get into this stuff with you, but for you, I'm curious, like, yeah, what's the opportunity that you would like love to show up? Can you imagine it? Like, what would be the perfect thing for you?
I think I'd be really excited to find an internal role with a organization or group or company that was doing some kind of coaching or teaching or development, where there was a really solid values alignment, really creative, interesting people who were looking for people to deliver on the experience that they're creating for whatever, larger organization or company or group that they're doing with, and to be in those creative conversations, but also be on a bench of people who gets to just focus on delivery.
Yeah.
And I think that would be, my lifestyle. I still have hours that I want to keep. I'm a little more flexible because my kids are older, so I don't have to be like at the bus stop at the right moment. But there are still some lifestyle constraints on my time that are really important to me and which I want to prioritize. And I like being remote because it's for all different kinds of variables, but I see more of those opportunities out there. It's really fascinating to see just to kind of explore and see. And something that's been very interesting for me, and this is, is like, it feels like a unicorn, quite frankly, when I think about finding a role or an opportunity that is the right fit for who I am and what I do and my experience and all the things that I enjoy most about my work. But then sometimes something will cross my path and I'll be like, oh, that exists. Like that's a like job that someone gets. And like, I haven't looked at that in such a long time that I'm trying not to, I'm open to being surprised about what is possible out there. And I know there are some very creative, dynamic groups that are doing some really cool stuff. And I was like, man, it'd be cool to just do stuff with them. One of the things that happened that I will share, and I'm curious your thoughts on this too, is, I'm a big fan of strengths work. And we've talked about this before. And
people again, we had a good chat about Clifton Strengths on the last
big
time
fan.
you were on the show.
And I still teach it. I just did a workshop on strengths for coaches. Like I just love strengths so much. And that's one thing that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I'm still a strengths advocate. But this past fall, so I think I mentioned this summer, things really got kind of turned down. And as I was coming into the fall, I'm like, well, maybe I want to find a job. And I have this colleague, her name is Catherine. She's also a coach. She's just very skilled practitioner as well, but we talk a lot about business stuff. And I was expressing to her background is in like marketing, right? And how to talk about things in a way that just makes sense and clear. And, I was sharing with her, I'm like, so I had this idea, like I'm an ideator. I woke up, I'm like, you know what I want to do this fall? I'm going to want to teach some classes. I'm going to teach some classes. But this wall came up of like, but I don't want to talk about, like, I don't want to think about the strategy of talking about it or telling. That's the kind of stuff, Robbie, that I just am like, I don't want. So I was telling her about it. That is the kind of stuff that comes very, very naturally to her. And so we partnered up. And we've been like, it's the first time in my coaching practice, and I'm curious if you've experienced this, where it's like, we said, well, what if we did it together? And all of a sudden, and it's a project, it's a grand experiment. Let's see what happens if we just try and put these classes on together, and I'll do these parts and you do these parts. And as long as it's fun and easy, we're great. Let's just check in all the time. Is it fun and easy? Yes, it's fun. Yeah. And something really insightful has happened where it's like, God, it is really, really hard doing all these things by yourself.
Yeah.
Because to run your own food truck, to have your own business, and to be a good cook requires wearing a lot of different hats. And I do think it's a lot to ask of oneself to be, not just be good at, but to enjoy all of the parts. And there has been something transformative around partnering with something equally, like both being excited about bringing an idea to life, but very naturally looking at it from different angles that complement one another. And I just want to put that out too and get your thoughts on it. Like, for anyone listening, like, I just want to acknowledge that creating a coaching, all the parts on one's own, is a lot to ask of oneself, to kind of be good at all the different pieces. And there is something, and I'm very grateful, and her and I talk about it all the time. We're like, oh my, it is so nice not doing this by ourselves. And I don't even mean like hiring an assistant. Even hiring an assistant, it's still coming from me kind of saying, hey, would you please do this? It is a true like equal partnership. And I just want to, give her a shout out, because what's happening right now is very much the synthesis of kind of not being isolated, and also finding someone who you can kind of share a vision with, but you both come at it from different angles that actually complement one another very well. And it was funny, after this last class, I was like, was the stuff you did, was that easy and fun for you? She's like, yes, I was worried that I wasn't doing enough. I'm like, are you kidding? It's incredible what happens when we both just say, well, this is easy and fun for me. Well, this is easy and fun for me. And it works together to create these really cool outcomes. And I'm curious if you've ever had that experience. Have you ever legit found someone to co-create something with, that you're both in on and you're both excited about, but you bring different strengths and skills into the mix? I don't know.
First thing, I mean, a couple of things in there made me laugh. One is, what's her, Catherine? I just feel like you might have accidentally like got Catherine like lots of leads from coaches who would like to want to do the craft but not the other bits. Like, I don't know. Obviously, that might not be how that one works.
Well, but what's cool is she's really, really good at the craft too.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. She's really good at the craft, and I'm good at the other bits. And that's been another kind of piece of it too, is we can kind of, it's not like we're speaking different languages and we don't get it. It's like,
and it's not completely separate either. Like, that's the thing that I'm listening. So the other thing that made me laugh is, I still think it's like massive empathy limit for me. Like, there are some things that I find trying, difficult, annoying, and I still find it, like, I know the theory that other people like doing those things, but no matter how much they tell me that they do, I can't really believe it. And so like, I love that story for that. It made me think of a few things, and one of them is that a friend of mine, Mike Toller, again, listeners will have heard me talk about this a bit before. So 5 years ago, it's a funny story. It's not funny. This is the magic of this stuff, Allegra. Like, 5 years ago, my coach at the time had listened to an interview that Tim Ferriss did with a woman called Debbie Millman. Now, Debbie Millman is an amazing woman. She's very interesting. She was a world-leading brand consultant, basically. Right. So there's a time when if you went into a supermarket in the USA, like, she'd have had a hand in half the products that you would see in there, or something like that, maybe even more. And in that episode, she gives this amazing exercise called a 5-year or a 10-year plan for a remarkable life. And my coach at the time, Joel, sent me this exercise, which is essentially just to think about your ideal future average day and to write it in as much detail as possible, start to finish. And my favorite thing about the exercise is, if you write it start to finish, all the detail and the big things just creep up on you, because you start by writing I opened my eyes. And then you have to write what you saw. And then like one of my clients opened her curtains and there were trees there. And that's how she found out that she didn't want to live in the city forever. Because it's like, she didn't sit down and think, what do I want in the future? Oh, I want to live in the countryside because that's hard. And I don't know. But I know that when I open my curtains, I'd love to see trees. And that for her in the end meant out of the city. And it's a little bit like what you said about if like you describe the ideal opportunity and then suddenly you start seeing the like maybe not that exact thing you described about what you'd love to do, but across your path will come these jobs that you wouldn't have looked at before, or these roles on LinkedIn, and it's like, or someone will mention something and you'll be like, oh, you know, that's not exactly the thing, but that's got like 98%, or that's got the whole soul of that thing I described to Robbie, even if it's got a different detail. And in my plan for a remarkable life, which was written April or May 2017, so it came up this year. And at the moment, and Debbie Millman says in this interview with Ferris, she used to do this for master's students that she used to teach, I think. She would say, like, be careful what you wish for.
Right.
And 5 years on, I mean, like, this is hard to believe stuff. Like the visions, 2017, I said we would have a little girl who I would get up with first thing and toddle around while my wife stayed asleep, and we would toddle around the place we lived, and we would you know, have funny little games and funny little conversations and have breakfast. And that's what I do half the week now.
Yeah.
And you know, we missed our big house, you know, by about 6 months, but we're about to move into that house. And funny thing about looking at this house that we've bought is in this vision, I think I'm pretty sure I step out onto a balcony. We go to this house, right? We look around it. It's this really weird thing in it. The master bedroom has these balcony doors that lead to nothing. So it's a bit scary, but it's like someone, whoever did that extension, the last people or the people before, had the vision for the balcony and haven't finished it yet. So it's like, we can do that. But in this vision, I had this vision of partnership. And what was really interesting as the 5 years came up is Mike and I were doing this work, and like, I hadn't thought about it deliberately, but accidentally we'd got into this place where we were doing a lot of that partnership together. And what the reason I think I caught that thing that you were talking about with Catherine, where you can do both things, but there's complementary pieces. Is kind of how Mike and I worked. There was this funny, some funny moments where, like, one of the ways that we struggle a bit to work together, but also it was really beneficial, is like, Mike is a really, like, maybe it's because he does some psychotherapy with his coaching, but he is a really, like, it's totally on the client to do whatever they want to do at any time. You know, really, like, it's their choice, it's their agenda, all that sort of stuff. And in my style is a bit more like, well, sometimes it's my job to give the client the feedback that no one else would give them.
Right.
And this thing, you get this if you're my client. It's like, I'll say it in a nice way, but like, I've noticed that you've showed up 10 minutes late for the last 3 conversations. What's up? Right. What's up? Right. You know, whereas Mike might just let that slide, or much more. So it was really nice when we were doing the work, you know, with our client. They weren't showing up 10 minutes late. Well, some of them were, but you know, it's a different thing. We were running a group program, but like, it was really nice to have that. It was particularly in the managing the business side of the partnership that it was really good to have 2, like you said, aligned values, similar, some parts, like not a mutually exclusive skill set, some overlapping stuff, but not completely overlapping. Definitely parts of the teaching, the structuring that we could take on differently, and including in the way we manage the business side of things. So that was a really, again, it's like a bit like, it's a big kind of thing for me, because it's like a bit like, can I run a coaching business? It's a bit like choosing not to run a coaching business, knowing that you can versus knowing that you can't. Like, knowing that that kind of partnership can exist then makes all the decisions about partnerships different.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you can get Mike's full 34 strengths and your full 34 strengths, and see, you know, Catherine and I did this a couple weeks ago, where I'm like, because we still are like, how is this working? So like, what makes this, because I wasn't looking for it. It wasn't, that's what's so interesting about it too. Like, someone might be like, I want to work with someone. It's almost like, and you and Mike had this relationship beforehand, like there's this groundwork that's laid in partnerships like that, that you almost can't just go find, because it comes out of this shared sense of values, sometimes shared experiences, sometimes shared stories, knowing each other. All that to be said, we looked at our strengths together, and it's incredible both what lines up, like so many things are in the exact same spot, but there are 4 or 5 that's like number 4 for her and number 26 for me, and it's like, that's it.
So
that it was so fascinating to hold those 2 lists up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is your 16, my 17, this is your 20, this is my 21. But then there were those few, and now I can just see it. I'm like, this is why this moment's working. It's because you're seeing it in this way and I can't, or vice versa. And I mean, it's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, if I hadn't told the story about Mike, I would have told the story about my friend Nicole Brigandy, and she and I, we used to do some StrengthsFinder work as well, which is partly why we did that thing that you've just described. And when I looked at, like, I don't remember all of them, but like one of them was, is it called recognition, or what's it called? There's one which is about like, basically there's an element of which is like, I love certifications. I love like the stamps that show, do you know what's that one?
It might be input. It could be learning.
No, it wasn't those two. Anyway, there's one, I wonder if I can find it. Maybe
self-assurance or command, maybe.
I think command was higher on Nicole's than mine, but there was this one that was like, exactly like you say, we had some in common, but there was, some that were like top of hers, bottom of mine. And it's so fun to see that. And it's definitely why, like, as soon as you've seen it, you can see why the what you call it, like the tension in the partnership creates new things.
Yeah.
But it's like, you need both. Nicole's like interest in, like, her career reads like, her career is full of the things that I wish I had on my CV, so I felt like I belonged as a kind of corporate coach. Yeah. It's like famous charities, famous consultancies, all these things, and mine says nothing. And so we get this nice like pull between that kind of thing and the knowledge of the inside, and in our case, and from her, and that sense of this is how it works, and then the kind of, for your word, like the more maverick side thing that I bring, which is like nothing to do with that. But here we are, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. So I wanted to share that for those kind of that it, because I do think it I don't know, there have just been thoughts of like, how could I ever do this on my own again? That's another thing about it too. And remains to be seen. I'm very high adaptability. I tend to take on work in like chunks, projects, seasons. So I know what I'm doing this fall, but then it's like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing at the beginning of 2023. Like, it remains to be seen. But that again is a reflection of my values and how, other people might be like, how do you not know?
Yeah.
I guess I'll find out when I get there. Ask me, James.
Have you job searched Gallup? Are they hiring any strengths coaches?
I poke around sometimes. I gotta, my biggest thing, this is a fascinating thing too, is like 10 years working for yourself. I don't have like a current resume. Like, it's that is honestly, because so many things I'm like, that's cool. And I'm like, even if I wanted to experiment with what it would be like to apply for a job and maybe get an interview, it's like, I guess I need to pull a resume together. So that's kind of at the top of my list of to-dos. If I really want to, I have some, you can have conversations with people and opportunities surface without having a resume. Don't get me wrong. And then I have, little pots boiling just from relationship building. And sometimes I see something super interesting and I'm like, I wonder what it would be like just to even talk to a person about that role. But you have to send something.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody just earlier on today about CVs, resumes, and how it's like it probably made sense when careers were different. But now what we need is some really smart engineer, developer, to build like some kind of 3D experience involving lots of different overlapping, flowing lines, which which actually tell you about a person, not like a list of things in chronological order, which doesn't quite capture a living soul.
Well, I've said I'm a verbal processor. It's easier for me to talk stuff out than it is for me to type them out.
Yeah.
And so I've said to myself, I'm like, and I know someone out there could do this, but I just want someone to sit down with me and just ask me questions about just ask me all kinds of questions, just let me talk and talk, and then come back with a template of like, okay, here you go. Here's the master kind of list of things you've done and the bullets and the blah, 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 blah. And, anyway, I know there's a person out there that does it. I just haven't gotten to the point where I'm ready to take that step, but it is in the back of my mind. I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I should probably
put it together. Yeah. Yeah. Well, who knows, Allegra? Maybe a listener to this show will either just give you the job that you described, or they will say, it's me, I'll speak to you and write your CV.
Well, and it's interesting too, and then I know we can wrap up because my dog is getting restless back there. You might be able to hear her pacing around.
Disappointingly not. I was saying to you just before we switched on the recording, there haven't been enough pets making appearance on this show. People on the video can see that beautiful dog.
That's Penny. Hi, Penny. I was going to say really quick, another interesting thing too is looking at, because before I was a coach, I was a teacher.
Yeah.
And I love teaching. I just love teaching. Just the art and craft of teaching, and it's been super interesting just looking at like, what is the current state of teaching? There are lots of virtual and remote teaching things, like just trying to figure out who are you if you remove the title.
Yeah.
And like more things become available when it's like, well, what if it's not coaching I'm doing? What if it's facilitation or teaching or workshop development or I don't know, like it's interesting kind of removing all the labels and just kind of putting all of my skills and experience and interest back into kind of the same soup and being open to like what that could look like. And it might look like something I'm not at all expecting, but
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. If we were to speak in a year's time, what's your intuition about, what do you know about what will be happening then?
I will hopefully be continuing to enjoy my family, and my kids will be a year older, and I'll still be enjoying reading and painting and doing some artwork and hopefully helping people and sharing ideas and taking things as an adventure and not knowing what's going to happen and trying it anyway. And hopefully putting stuff out in the world that helps someone if they hear it. I hope one person hears this and it helps them in some way. That's kind of my thing. I'm like, if one person hears it and it helps them in some way, then that's how I try. And that's the spark from which I create and just kind of put stuff out. It's like, that's all I know.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I'm glad you put in the having ideas. Because it is a thing that stands out for me about speaking to you. And I think people who do listen to you, coaches who listen to you, will only, like, one of the things that they will really get from you that I don't think people don't get from me in the same way, for example, is this set of distinctions and ideas and metaphors. And when you listed the things that you were putting in the bucket, if you take the labels off, you didn't actually mention that. So because I'm really curious, if you were to get a job somewhere, where I'll be fascinated if that is the next phase for you. To get more, like, whether that idea is, like you said before, it happens. I'm sure some of it will continue to just overflow out of you on your podcasts or with the clients that you keep going. I wonder, like, if I was employing you in an organization, which I had, I would be wanting to harness that bit of you on behalf of an organization as well, because it's really fun to experience.
I love creativity, and I love contributing to what's possible. And I mean, ideas are just, I'm what could we do? Well, we could do this, we could try that, we could do this, we could do that. I mean, that's one of my favorite, that's what I love doing on my coaching calls now. A coach will be like, well, what should I do here? Oh, well, we could do this, you could try that. And I would hope to be doing more of that too, and helping other people try new stuff. I'm a big fan of that as well. It's like, can I help someone go do a thing that they really want to try and do? And what container or package that looks like, whether it's something that I've created on my own or it's an opportunity I find somewhere else, is I guess remains to be seen.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of life. It's the beauty of life.
It is, Allegra. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. This has been awesome.
Total pleasure. I think we're on like, I said this last time we spoke on your podcast, I said,
yes,
we're on like a 3 out of 3 record for great conversations, or 4 out of 4. I think we're on 4 out of 4 or 5 out of 5 now. Yeah. We'll put links to you and all that kind of thing in the show notes. But is there anything that you want to share with listeners before we go that we haven't said?
No, I mean, my stuff is all over at allegrastein.com. You can find me on Instagram if you want to come say hi. I'm a high relator, so I like getting to know people. So I'm like, who's the one person who's like, oh my gosh, I had an idea. I'm like, what did you hear? What do you want to? Please let me know. Let Robbie know, and we'll stay connected about all of it. But I'm always interested in what blooms from the seeds we plant. So
yeah, so let Allegra know.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.